When Sara Crewe arrived in London from faraway India, she was not quite like other little girls. She had deep green eyes, thick dark hair, and a thoughtful way of speaking that made people stop and listen. Her papa, Captain Crewe, loved her more than anything in the world, and had spared no expense to make sure she was comfortable. He dressed her in velvet and lace, filled her trunk with books and dolls, and even brought her a French maid named Mariette. It was a grey, chilly day when they arrived at Miss Minchin's select seminary for young ladies. The school sat on a quiet street, its brick walls and tall windows looking proper and important. Miss Minchin herself, a tall woman with cold eyes and a stiff smile, came down to greet them. She wore black silk and looked every bit the headmistress. Captain Crewe introduced his daughter proudly. "This is Sara," he said, resting a hand on her shoulder. "She's a clever child, and I've told her she must be a good little girl and learn everything she can." Miss Minchin gave Sara a careful look. She saw the fine clothes, the expensive boots, the proud way the girl held herself, and decided that Sara was someone she should treat very well, especially because her father was so rich. Sara was shown to her room, a pretty little space with soft rugs, a warm fire, and a lovely doll waiting on the bed. Her new classmates watched her with curious eyes. Some were jealous of her fine things, but others, like shy Ermengarde, soon became her friend. What made Sara different was the way she spoke, her imagination, and how kindly she treated everyone, even the scullery maid Becky. She made up stories out of nothing, castles in the sky, jungles filled with tigers, and princesses who wore invisible crowns. "I always pretend things are nice," Sara said once. "And if you make believe long enough, sometimes you forget they aren't." Miss Minchin didn't understand Sara's daydreams, but she tolerated them. After all, Sara's papa paid extra for everything. Sara had her own sitting room, special lessons, and even French conversations with Monsieur Dufarge. Though she missed India and her father, Sara tried to be cheerful. She believed it was important to act like a princess, not because of riches or gold crowns, but because it meant being brave, gentle and strong, especially when it was hard. And so Sara settled into her new life, watched closely by Miss Minchin, and quietly adored by girls who wished they could be like her. Sara had lived at Miss Minchin's school for 2 years, and though she often missed her father and the sunny days of India, she tried to be happy. Everyone knew she was turning 11 soon, and her birthday was sure to be grand. Miss Minchin was already planning a large party, not because she was fond of Sara, but because it made the school look good to have such a rich and elegant pupil. Captain Crewe, though far away in India, had sent a generous amount of money for the celebration. He had also arranged for a beautiful doll to be delivered, one that would be finer than any other girl at the school had ever seen. It was to come from a famous toy shop dressed in real lace and silk. Sara didn't ask for any of it. She never made a fuss about her fine things. Still, she was quietly excited, not for the presents or the cake, but because her father had remembered and loved her so much. The big day came and the school was buzzing. In the drawing room, the table was filled with cakes, sweets and tea. Girls gathered around as Sara opened her gifts. And then the doll arrived, tall and elegant, with real eyelashes and a wardrobe of its own. "It's almost like having another person to take care of," Sara said softly. "She shall be called Emily." But just as the party was in full swing, there was a knock at Miss Minchin's office door. A man in dark clothes handed her a letter, and she read it silently. Her face changed. Her eyes grew cold and sharp. She called Sara in. "Come here," she said stiffly. "I have something to tell you." Sara looked up, wondering why Miss Minchin's voice sounded so strange. Your father is dead, Miss Minchin said. He has died of jungle fever in India and he has lost all his money. Sara stood still. She didn't cry, she didn't scream. She felt cold all over, like something inside her had turned to ice. I am sorry to say, Miss Minchin went on, that you are now penniless. You have nothing. Everything changed in an instant. The rich girl with velvet dresses and books and dolls was now just a poor lonely orphan. Miss Minchin was not kind. She was angry that she had spent money on a child who could no longer pay her way. She called Sara a beggar and moved her from her warm, lovely room to a cold, bare attic. She took away her clothes and gave her old, thin garments to wear. From that day on, Sara was no longer a student. She was a servant. Sara's new life was nothing like the one she'd known before. Gone were the soft rugs and the cheerful fire in her bedroom. Now she lived at the very top of the school, in a small cold attic room with slanted ceilings and barely any furniture. The bed was hard, the blankets thin, and there was only one chair, old and rickety. She rose early, scrubbed floors, ran errands and carried coal up the stairs. She served food to the girls who used to be her classmates. The teachers hardly looked at her and some of the students turned their backs when she passed. But even in her sadness, Sara didn't lose her kindness or her imagination. She still believed in pretending, especially when things were most difficult. There was no harm in pretending, she would whisper in the dark attic, staring out the tiny window. I am a princess, Sara told herself. Even if I'm wearing rags and my shoes have holes, I can still behave like one. She talked to Emily, the one doll she had managed to keep. She tried not to cry when she was cold or hungry. And so, while the world around her grew darker, Sara lit a small light in her heart and held on to it with all her strength. I try not to be afraid, she told Becky one night, as they sat in the attic eating a piece of bread between them. Whatever comes, I can pretend it is a story, and I am the princess in it. Becky, the kitchen maid, had become Sara's closest friend. Becky worked just as hard, sometimes harder. But when the two girls could steal a few minutes together, they whispered dreams and told stories as if they weren't too tired. Hungry servants in a cold attic, but two noble ladies hiding in a tower. Sara still went to class sometimes, but only to show the younger girls how to read or to help them remember their lessons. She was never allowed to sit among them like she used to. Even so, she was gentle and kind to the little ones, especially Lottie, who still came running to Sara when she cried. Tell me a story, Lottie would beg. And Sara always did. She made up tales about brave queens and lost princesses, about dragons and secret spells. Her words made everything feel a little brighter, even for a moment. Sometimes when she was alone, Sara would press her face to the cold window of her attic room. From there, she could see the rooftops and the house next door, a grand place with a beautiful garden and tall windows that glowed with warm light. She imagined the people inside must be kind and happy. One day, as she peeked out, she saw something curious. A monkey climbing across the windowsill of the next house. It made her smile, the first real smile in days. Then she spotted a man, dressed in fine clothes, watching the monkey with a tired look in his eyes. A servant helped him gently back to a chair. That man was called Mr. Carrisford, and he had recently come from India. He had been very sick for a long time, and he still looked pale and tired. His servant, Ram Das, helped take care of him. Mr. Carrisford was quiet and often sad. He sat by the fire in his chair thinking about his past and the mistakes he had made. Long ago, he had been the best friend of Captain Crewe, Sara's father. The two men had once invested money together in a diamond mine, but when Carrisford got sick and Captain Crewe died, everything had gone wrong, or at least, that's what they thought. What Mr. Carrisford didn't know was that the mine had not failed. It had made a fortune. Now he had more money than he knew what to do with. But instead of being happy, he felt terrible. He believed Sara must be out there somewhere, alone and poor, and it was his fault. "I must find her," he told his solicitor. "She's just a child and I let her down. Somewhere in this big city she is suffering." So every day people were sent out to look for the lost daughter of Captain Crewe, but the trouble was no one knew she was living right next door. One day Ramdas was on the roof of the gentleman's house when he happened to glance over to the attic window next door. There he saw a thin little girl with large, tired eyes sitting by a broken chair. He saw how carefully she helped the servant girl with her chores and how kindly she spoke, even though she clearly had nothing. Ramdas told Mr. Carrisford about her, and both men began to watch. There was something special about this child, something strong and gentle in the way she moved. So Mr. Carrisford began sending small surprises. One morning when Sara and Becky returned from their errands, they found the attic fire lit and a tray of warm food waiting. Another day there were thick blankets. Then one evening, new slippers and cozy nightgowns appeared. "It's magic," Becky whispered, eyes wide. Sara smiled a little. "Someone knows," she said softly. "Someone saw us, and they care." Neither of them could imagine that the magic was coming from the sad Indian gentleman next door, who was searching for a little girl he believed he'd never find. Sara didn't dare to hope for too much, but in her heart the warmth began to grow, like a candle that had been lit in the dark. She still wore rags. She still worked hard and felt hungry most nights. But inside her, she still imagined her invisible crown, still carried herself like someone who mattered. Because even when the world forgets who you are, a true princess never forgets herself. One rainy evening, something unusual happened that would change everything. The monkey from next door, Mr. Carrisford's pet, had escaped again. He was always climbing and sneaking about, and this time he scurried across the rooftops and into Sara's attic window. Sara wasn't afraid. The little creature looked cold and lost, just like she often felt, so she gently caught him and tucked him under her shawl to keep him warm. The next morning she went next door to return him. She had never stepped foot in that house before. Everything was warm and rich, the carpet soft, the air smelling of flowers and wood smoke. She was led to the study where the pale Indian gentleman sat, wrapped in a robe near the fire. When Sara walked in, Mr. Carrisford looked at her carefully. There was something familiar in her eyes. "You are the little girl from the attic," he said softly. "The one Ramdas saw." "Yes, sir," Sara replied, standing politely but with dignity, even in her shabby clothes. "The monkey came into my room. I thought I should bring him back." Carrisford nodded slowly, still studying her face. "What is your name, child?" Sara Crewe." The room went very still. The name struck him like a bell. For a moment he couldn't speak. "Crewe?" he said again, leaning forward. "Your father, was he Captain Crewe? From India?" Sara's heart skipped. "Yes, sir, he died. Long ago." Then Mr. Carrisford did something strange. He stood up, though he was weak, and took her hands in his. "My dear," he whispered, his voice shaking, "I've been looking for you for so long." Sara didn't understand. "Looking for me?" she said in surprise. Carrisford gently sat her down and told her everything. He had been her father's friend, and they had once invested money in a diamond mine. They had thought it was lost, but it hadn't been. The mine had made them both rich. But before the news reached her father, he had died. Carrisford had been too sick to act, and when he finally recovered, Sara had vanished. "I was too late," he said with tears in his eyes. "I've searched every school in London, and all this time, you were right next door." Sara was quiet, trying to take it all in. Could it be true? Was her papa's fortune still alive? Was she no longer a servant girl? Mr. Carrisford spoke kindly. "You are your father's daughter. Everything that was his now belongs to you." Sara's eyes filled with tears, but she sat very still, just like a princess would. "There's someone else I must ask about," she said after a moment. "Becky, the maid who has been my dearest friend. May she come too?" Carrisford smiled. "Of course. Anyone who was kind to you when you had nothing must have a place now that you have everything." The very next day Miss Minchin received a visitor, Mr. Carrisford himself. She was shocked to see Sara arrive in fine clothes, looking healthier already, when she found out the truth, that Sara was an heiress after all and had been mistreated under her roof. Miss Minchin's face turned pale with embarrassment and fear. "I always meant to be kind," she said quickly. Sara looked at her quietly. "You were not," she answered simply. Miss Minchin tried to argue, but Sara had nothing more to say. Later that day, Becky was brought to the big house. Her eyes widened as she stepped into the warm room and saw the bed piled with blankets just for her. "It's like a fairy story," she whispered. "It's our story," Sara said, "and it's not done yet." Sara Crewe had gone from riches to rags, and now she had found her way back again. But she wasn't the same girl she had been before. She was stronger, kinder, and full of quiet wisdom. That's what made her a true princess, not the money or fine clothes, but the way she had stayed good and brave, even when everything had been taken from her. Now, in her new home with Mr. Carrisford, Sara was warm, safe, and cared for. She had soft dresses again, plenty of delicious food, and books and dolls if she wanted them. But she never let those things make her proud or selfish. Becky's life changed too. She had a room of her own, clean clothes, and plenty to eat. But more than anything, she had a friend in Sara, and the two girls were as close as sisters. Sara didn't forget her old friends at the school either. She asked to see Ermengarde, who had always tried to be kind. When Ermengarde walked into the drawing room and saw Sara standing there in velvet again, she burst into tears and hugged her. "Oh, Sara," she cried, "I thought I would never see you again, not like this." Sara smiled. "I told you I would still be a princess even if I lived in the attic." She also visited Lottie, the little girl who had always come to Sara for comfort. Now it was Sara's turn to bring Lottie into her new world, where no one would ever scold her unfairly again. And what about Miss Minchin? Well, life at the school became much harder for her. Parents heard what had happened to Sara and weren't impressed. New students stopped arriving. Miss Minchin tried to act as if it had all been a misunderstanding, but deep down she knew she had lost something far more important than money. She had lost her dignity. As for Sara, she made Mr. Carrisford's house a place full of warmth and laughter. She brought sunshine into his life just as she had into Becky's and Lottie's and so many others. She sat by the fire and told stories, and sometimes, when she looked out the window at the rooftops, she would whisper, "It really was magic after all." She never forgot her attic, or the cold, or the empty stomach. But she also never forgot the lessons she learned during that time. How to hope, how to imagine, and how to stay kind no matter what. "Whatever comes," Sara once said, "one can always turn it into a story." And her story now was a beautiful one, not because it ended with wealth, but because it was full of courage, friendship, and grace. Sara had always believed that being a princess wasn't about what you have. It was about what you are. And in the end, everyone saw the truth. She had always been a little princess.